this meeting to order. It's October the 25th, Monday, and this is the second planned meeting of the Tumbleton Town Council. First item of business this evening is approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any discussion? See none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Second item of business is the manager's report. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two quick items tonight for you. Had a lot of discussion about the railroad tracks now that the barriers are built. How come the horns are still blowing? The real answer is that now that they're all built, we were waiting for the one on Route 9 to be completed, and that was just done a few weeks ago. We had to have Federal Railroad come up. They did their final inspection. They gave us our punch list. And two items we have to still complete is the traffic counts now at each one of the railroad crossings. We are responsible to do that every 5 years. So every 5 years, we'll have to update those numbers. And the quiet zone calculator, if you remember how that all works, it's the number of accidents and the number of traffic counts and a whole bunch of other things that go into that. That has to be redone after the new traffic numbers are presented. We hope to have that done in the next few weeks. And once that is completed and submitted to Federal Railroad, they will give the railroad a 21-day notice to comply with ceasing of the horns on the three public crossings. The one still at Falmouth on the Green is a private crossing, and we are working through our legal staff to come up with a solution. I believe it will require both towns, Falmouth and Cumberland, to come up with the creative solution of either having one quiet zone from Portland to Yarmouth, and they would qualify by just the low counts at each one of the public crossings, and that would make their number go lower. It seems kind of a little bit risky. I mean, we're talking about statistics, and we're also talking about people at these crossings. We put all these barriers in everywhere at the public crossings, but this one crossing would have most likely not require any barriers. So something to think about if we could get that done. The second option is somehow creating that to become a public crossing, which would require us to take ownership of the road on each side of it for some distance, creating a public easement across a Falmouth road and a Cumberland road, and it gets really complicated and messy after that. I think the easier thing would be to bring the two towns together and create one quiet zone, but that will take a little bit of doing as well. So more to come on that as we get down the road. And the last item I had tonight was the brown-tail moss. A lot of discussion about that. We are, again, had a really tough year with brown-tail moss, especially on the Yarmouth and North Yarmouth borders of our community, and then pockets everywhere else. If you have ornamental trees, fruit trees, those type of things, please cut them off and burn them. So they don't come out this spring. They will come out in May. May is when they typically come out, and that's when we have sprayed them in the past. We will be doing a nest count in January, is typically when the state comes down to help us, the state entomologist and the Maine Forestry Services working together to figure out where the counts are. We still have high counts along Blanchard Road, Greeley Road Extension in that area. But again, not all the nests are near the road. And remember, our program was just a road spraying program where we were shooting chemicals 100 feet in the air to spray the tops of these mostly oak trees, I guess. So for me, I really don't know how effective that program was. We basically could spray about 2 or 3% of the forested area in those along the Forest side when we were doing it there, and up and down Tuttle Road. So essentially 95% plus was still going untreated. An aerial spray program is probably the most effective, but that would require some help from the state because it would be well over $500,000 to $750,000 to spray the town aerially. So that will have more information in January, but a lot of people have been asking. We haven't sprayed now for 2 years, And most of the infestation, we'll post the map up in January once we have the webs, but most of the infestation the state has mapped has been heading kind of northwesterly away from Cumberland. It doesn't even show any infestation in Falmouth, and if you remember those maps a couple years ago, they were extremely like in the red zone, hot zone for brown-tailed moth. They're still around. They're always around, regardless if we extract them. What we're having now is just an explosion of the population, and Mother Nature is really the only thing that has effectively taken care of it. The spraying, I think, was more of a placebo effect than anything. Although not having all that in your front yards was probably helpful for folks that had property along the road, but, you know, spraying $20,000 a year for less than essentially 5 miles of roads was just seemed a little bit like shoveling against the tide to me, but that's where we're at. More to come in January.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is anyone here from the public who would like to address the council? Seeing none. Legislation and Policy 21-105. To hear a report from the Finance Director regarding fourth quarter fiscal year 21 and first quarter fiscal 22 financials. Alina.
Good evening. So I'm going to go over FY21. We just finished that in June. We had a audit. Auditors came in September. We're wrapping up right now on the comprehensive annual financials. They're with them for review. So, but before we started, I actually wanted to kind of, hold on one second, I'm sorry. Wanted to do a look back. You know, a year and a half ago, we were building this budget, and the pandemic had just hit back in March. And so we did a lot of changes to the budget going into FY21. We reduced expenses by over $900,000 by freezing, hiring freezes. We did a zero increase on wages. We reduced our capital by over $700,000. We also reduced our revenues. We reduced our motor vehicle excise tax because we weren't sure what the expectation was. We also reduced the state revenue sharing because we didn't know what to expect, what the outcome was. So we didn't want to set ourselves up for failure in regards to what our expectations were for revenue. With all that in consideration, we actually did very well. Our revenues came in higher than what we expected, especially with the excise tax and the motor vehicle. And our expenses, not only did we not spend what we weren't budgeting, but we also didn't spend what we budgeted ourselves to use. In regards to excise tax, we ended up actually collecting, it looks here like a lot more than we anticipated. Again, we had reduced our excise tax revenue by $200,000 from our FY20 budget. Not only did that happen, but what also occurred was, so our shutdown started in March of 2020, which would have been fiscal year 20. And a lot of our motor vehicle collection happens towards that last quarter of the fiscal year, or it happens throughout the year, but what we ended up seeing happening is that a lot of the collection that we anticipated for May and June for 20 actually occurred at the beginning of 21 in July. So it's a very inflated number that we have. So when you would compare it to last year, it almost looks like we've like did amazingly bigger than last year. Same thing with the state share. We reduced it, if you remember, We were about 800,000 at the end of FY20, and we reduced it because state shares sales tax. So the expectation is if there isn't purchases being made, we weren't going to expect to see that happening with the revenues. So again, being conservative, we reduced our state share, but that actually came in well above the budget. Permits and impact fees, again, seems that we had a lot of people at home working on home renovations and new builds. So that number stayed quite high compared to last year. And our emergency transportation billing, it stayed flat. And again, that's based on actual events that occur. On our three biggest departments that we have, police, fire, and public services, they all came in under budget. A lot of that has to do, again, with freezing, hiring freezes. We didn't, so we had vacancies that we left open. We also did not have wage increases for fiscal year '21. We also saw a reduction in fuel usage and actually road salt for public services. Moving forward, we were starting to look at Valhalla on its own. As you can see, Valhalla did actually very well. With the changes that were implemented in regards to the way the tea times are managed and our credit card program, as well as it seems an invigoration based on what happened with the pandemic. We actually made money on Valhalla this past year, so we're very excited about that. A lot of that had to do with the greens fees, and the memberships were quite higher than the year before. And then, and the opposite to that happened with the rec department. As if you remember, rec department, one of its biggest sources of funding is the after-school program. And we opened that and expanded it because we had schools that at the time we were doing in '21, this is a school year where they were doing 2 days on and 2 days off. So you had some people utilizing it as a full day. But whenever school was closed, we had to shut down the program, which meant that we were also experiencing a loss for the rec department. So, and then also there was an unsurability on whether or not what other programs would be able to run. I did provide in your packet, you have a detail in the back in regards to the department, and you'll see that on a program by program basis, the rec department actually did very well. We just didn't do enough to cover our administrative costs. But our administrative costs themselves were below budget. And here we just do, you could see the yellow line represents the budget, our actual spend over or under budget. And as you can see, the yellow line represents this last fiscal year. And we, compared to the last previous 4 years, we were spending under budget for the whole, pretty much the entire year. The other item we reviewed was the fund balance and what was our, what we wanted to do moving forward. And as the council and the town, we wanted to get to 12%. And we did meet our budget, or meet our plan of getting to the 11.1% for the end of this fiscal year. So we're there now. I just wanted to give you, show you how well we've been doing over the last few years. And that's all I have for FY21.
Allison?
I just have a couple comments. Number one, thank you for the guidance around the kind of our general fund balance. That'll come back up, I know, in a future agenda item. So putting us in such a position that hopefully our cash flow is in a state where we potentially don't need to take out a tax anticipation note. But really, probably the more important one is kind of to your opening comments. I think I probably speak on behalf of the whole town council, but a big thank you to our municipal employees. You talked about zero increase in their wages and a hiring freeze, and we did lose some folks, so we were understaffed in a lot of ways. And if folks remember, we had an unprecedented election that these employees were managing with absentee ballots and COVID protocol. And Mr. Manager, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever closed our town hall to the public.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, sorry, 2 weeks. But one of only, I think, a handful of municipalities that kept their town open to serve the public. And I think it's really easy to kind of just say, hey, these are our employees, our taxes, tell you their salaries, but they're residents of this town. And I just think we owe them a debt. And so if you do come in to register your cars or do anything, I think they all deserve a big thank you because they've gotten us through quite the unprecedented 18 months and continue to do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
So in regards to FY22, so now, because we looked at FY21, I ask you to look at FY22 with a different set of lenses. This lens would be to not compare it to 21 because of all of the anomalies that we dealt with in 21. And as you'll see and end up seeing is that we're actually on target right now. There's no concern of where we are or where we plan to be. Our revenue collection is strong for property as well as motor vehicles, and our expenses are still within our budgetary allowability. Again, when you look at excise tax, now it's going to be the reverse of what happened in 21, because our tax collection in 21 boosted up because of some of it contained 2022 is going to look a little bit on the low side, but in actuality, we're doing very well. If you look at the detail that is included with your financial packet, you'll also see that excise tax, state revenue, all of these revenue lines are much better than what we were in 20 as well. State revenue sharing is actually, it looks like we're on target. We're actually collecting at a higher rate than we did in 21, about $10,000 a month more than we did in the 21 year. So that's always a plus. And our permits and impact fees continue to be on the upswing in regards to revenues. Again, with the police department and the fire, public services, so these three departments all had vacancies, many vacancies. And what we're seeing is what happened is July 1, we were back open to rehire those vacant positions, but they really didn't come into play until maybe August and September, and in some places October of this year. So we do have a little bit of lapsed salary in there so we have a little bit of budgetary savings that we're seeing for the first quarter. Again, Valhalla doing very well, continues to do well, and it's very strong, those numbers. If you look at where we were first quarter last year and the previous 3 years, you'll see that we were always in a loss. And this year, we're actually at a gain. So I'm very hopeful that we'll continue to see strong numbers for Valhalla. And Recreation Department, a big, big hand to them. They're doing really, really well coming into FY22. With school back in business, Pete's doing a great job coordinating all of the programs that he had previously going on. And we have very, very strong attendance and programs. Soccer was amazing for him this year. So they're doing very well, and we're we're seeing very strong numbers. Rec department was one of those departments, I didn't mention it in the last quarter, where we were realigning all of the revenues and expenses to match up to the current revenues and collections for that program. Summer was one of those ones that was falling out of alignment. So the summer numbers are the summer numbers. They're over, and they did really well. They did about an $80,000 gain on the program. So we're really excited about that. And that's all I have right now for first quarter. I try not to spend too much time on first quarter. We have a lot of situations where we see one-time purchases being made early on in the year that doesn't really match up to a quarter. So but right now, everything is looking really, really good for our first quarter.
John?
We need to recognize and appreciate the things that North Yarmouth did for us as well.
Absolutely.
They helped us with their facility, which was really helpful, so.
Yes, during the summer program where we were trying to make sure there was enough room and enough social distancing to allow the children to be in the different places, correct?
So thank you, North Yarmouth.
Anybody else have any comments? Thank you, Helena.
Thank you.
Very encouraging. Second item,
Mr.
21
Chair,
dash-
excuse me, we do have to make a motion to accept those reports. Our auditors are asking us to actually take council action on these reports.
Okay. Let me find my white sheet of paper here. All right, so there is a motion, Chair is asking for a motion. Anybody like to,
Bob, I'll make the motion. I move to accept the first quarter and fourth quarter of fiscal year, excuse me. I move to accept the first quarter and fourth quarter financial reports as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Second.
first, motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. All right, now to the second item on the business, 21-106. To hold a public hearing to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to solicit bids for a tax anticipation note for $2 million as approved in the fiscal year 2022 budget as recommended by the Finance Committee. And just to put that into perspective, as we look back at the presentation by Helena, and we looked at our and I gotta go back here to the category of fund balances, and to show that we have, in fiscal year 14, we had or 15, we had a 7% fund balance, and this year we're up to 11%. We're working towards a balance of 12%, and the idea is that taxes are collected twice a year, and we have a wave, so to speak, as to when we have money, when we don't have money, and in the past, we haven't had money to pay the school. So basically, the tax anticipation note, as the town manager will explain to you, is to pay our bill to the school, and it's based on the revenues and the tax collection of the community. And by having a fund balance, and we believe that we'll have a savings this year by not having to actually go to the banks and borrow money for this, there'll be a savings of $26,000. But the idea of authorizing the town manager to go to bonding and to solicit bids is that we have a process, a procedure in place so that if we don't have the revenues, that we can have that tax anticipation note. So Is there anything you want to add to that?
I'd like to also add that once the bids are solicited, we still have one more step to authorize them too. It's just soliciting bids doesn't mean an automatic, if we don't need them, we don't need them, but we're ready to borrow. What we're doing tonight is making sure we're ready to borrow if it comes to that.
Perfect. So you guys get it. So it's truly, it's about cash flow. When we're paying out $1.7 million in a school payment every month, we hit $5.1 million due to the school before we start receiving taxes in September. So September's usually not our problem. It's usually January. So we're looking and projecting, Helene and I have gone through the numbers, and I feel very confident that we'll be okay. When we talk about fund balance, that's our savings account. That's our saving account that's not encumbered, that's basically sits there to basically get us through these low dips in our cash flow. And January and August are usually dips. So usually it's January when we have the problem. And the school also, to give the Scott Poulin and Jeff Porter a lot of credit, if we delay typically our payment to the school a week or 10 days, in 1 year, it basically avoided us borrowing the money. So that's how quick the taxes come in, especially the second payment on March 15th. We send out the bills around February 1st to give people time to pay it, and once those monies start coming in, it really does help in February. So looking at what we have for cash on hand, that's totally undesignated monies. That's when you hear those terms, undesignated fund balance. It's really your savings account that has no strings attached to it, and we're doing fairly well. I think we're over $3.1 million, $3.2 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Once we get to closer to 4, we really won't have to worry about going out for tax anticipation notes. So great job on explaining it, everybody, and I appreciate that.
We have to make a motion here again.
I'll give you a motion. Oh, please. Go ahead.
I move to authorize the town manager to solicit bids for a tax anticipation note for $2 million as approved in the fiscal year 2022 budget as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? See none.
Mr. Chairman, these are public hearings, so we do have to open up the public before we vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, this one is a public hearing. Does anybody for the public like to comment on this particular article? Seeing none, we will now, any further discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Somebody's got to keep me on task here. Item 21-107, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a zone change request for a property located at 10 Old Gray Road, tax map U21, Lot 2, from Village Office Commercial 1 Zone, VOC1, to the Village Medium Density Residential Zone, VMDR, as recommended by the Planning Board. So, this was an item that came before us a month, 2 months ago, from a property owner up off the Old Gray Road, where it meets Route 100, and it's a pie-shaped piece of lot. It's commercial. The owner has expressed a desire to change the lot so that he can break the lot in half, because he feels that there's no commercial value to this lot. And so the council met and moved it forward to the planning board for an opinion. And now it is back before us. And I think that there is a fair amount of discussion to be had on this item. So is there anything, Mr. Manager, that you'd like to brief us on this matter before we?
No, I think the only thing, I think in my memo to you, I said it might have been unanimous. I think it was a 6-1 vote. There was one negative vote against at the planning board, right? So No, I think the request to change the zone would allow it to basically split the lot because of the zoning in the adjacent Vmdr zone. So,
One thing that the lot owner was required to do as part of the process was to prove that he did not have accessibility onto Route 100. So I didn't respond. We got an email from Kathy Wright, who's a West Cumberland neighbor and protective of the development rights of commercial development in West Cumberland. But has not been as clear in this process is that the Maine DOT will not allow him additional or even commercial access onto that piece of property from Route 100.
So go ahead, Mark.
So I guess with that said, is that implying that this piece of property, even if zoned as commercial, is effectively unusable for commercial
Well,
purposes?
not totally. It could still be commercial, but you'd have to access from the residential side of the property. And I'm not sure the residential neighbors across the street on Old Gray Road would be interested in that.
Sure.
I'll admit that when I first saw the application before us, that I didn't see a big, I didn't have too many concerns. However, I've had a chance to give this a little bit of thought. Mr. Kopp made a comment about having the ability to take some of his land and convert it to another zone, and how that may benefit him or his family. And the thing that bothers me probably more than anything else is a precedent setting here. Are we setting precedents to allow somebody to capture or benefit monetarily at our expense? And if we're encouraging, or if we're allowing this to go forward, the ramifications are I don't like it. It's you know, if it was just a breaking of a lot, but I see this as nothing more than, you know, a monetary benefit to the homeowner, and I can't quite get beyond that. I think we could probably ask the homeowner, if he's here this evening, to address that, but it is a sticking point with me. Any other council members?
I do have one question in reply to your comment. How would it be an expense to us, or an expense to us, you said?
Well, maybe,
said
maybe
at
I
our
didn't, maybe I didn't
expense.
phrase that quite right.
Are you thinking to the extent, so when I first came to this, my first thought was I have skepticism in the town of Cumberland, we have very few plots of land that are currently zoned for commercial activity. And so my concern, I'm always hesitant whenever we say, hey, we're going to take a commercially zoned property and turn it into residential. Just given the fact that it's kind of a vanishing pie, and at the end of the day, there's really nothing left for business along Route 100 and along maybe Route 1 as well. So in the sense of maybe it's costing us something, maybe it's a lost potential economic opportunity for a potential business to be in that location, is the way I always have thought about that. So I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but that was my initial reaction when the gentleman first came here. I don't know if that gentleman is here
And that would be
today.
mine if he had access, commercial access from Route 100.
Right.
But he submitted the paperwork
That
that
he does not.
indicated he does not. And it's not spot zoning in the true sense of spot zoning, like if Ron wanted to take his lot and change it into something, he should probably look at what his abutting property owners are, what his neighborhood is or looks like, and then the neighborhood, there is a neighborhood on the back side of that property.
Roy?
The problem that I have with this is this was zoned the way it is when he purchased this land. It hasn't changed while he's owned the land. Diagonally across from his land on Route 100, on the right side headed north, there is a commercial piece of property that is for sale that's been there stagnant. I talked to the owner of that property a week ago, and he gave me a price on it. If I can change the zoning on it, I'll buy it tomorrow. That's the way I look at this piece of property. If I can put a residential home on that lot across from him, I will purchase it tomorrow. So if I purchase it tomorrow, I'm gonna come to you guys and see if I can get a zone change. So are we setting a precedent?
Would the DOT give you commercial access to that land across the street?
Probably,
But they won't give it to him?
but he can access it off from the old Gray Road.
Okay.
But what I'm getting at is what's good for one is good for another. And I don't want to set a precedence along Route 100 that this is going to become hodgepodge spot zoning.
Right.
And that's what bothers me.
So I've read the agenda in front of me, and this is a public hearing. So that being said, is there anybody from the member of the public like to address us on this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see the Banfields in the audience tonight, unless I'm looking right at them and I don't see them. But I'm just curious why they're not here, and might it be appropriate to table it to the next meeting and ask him to come to represent himself? Because there's no urgency to take action, and if we take the action tonight, then we'll have to, at the next meeting, might have to untangle it, which
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
just something, and we'll reach out to him. I expected him to be here because when I was at the planning board, I explained this was a recommendation of the council and that you would be meeting tonight, so he might have been out of town.
I move to table.
Second.
Before I let anybody second that, because a motion to table
Ends
ends
discussion.
discussion. I believe that I asked or mentioned asking for the town attorney to give us some recommendation as to whether we were indeed setting a precedent.
They replied, no, you were not.
Okay. I will take that motion now.
I'll make the motion
And I will second.
to table.
Motion's been made to move, to table this item, and it's been seconded. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda, 21-108, to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to execute purchase agreements for Valhalla equipment for the next 5 years as recommended by the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee met with the Assistant Town Manager this past week and discussed about some of the items that were up for purchase. And so every year, the town buys new equipment. It's not necessarily for Valhalla, it may be just a new dump truck. If you looked at our excavator, you'd probably wonder why we haven't bought a new excavator. It looks like it could fall off, track should fall off on any day now, but that's another story. But anyways, we don't just buy equipment for the sake of buying equipment, and we don't buy new lawnmowers every 5 years. We buy equipment as necessary, and I think if anybody really dug around, they would see that things are worn out and well-used and replaced as necessary. So there is some lawnmowers here, a triplex mower, a rough mower, a blower, cutting units, a snow blower, and things that are used in the golf course business that I'm not familiar with. This is a matter of ordinary business. Any discussion before we ask for a motion?
It's a public hearing too, isn't it?
Go ahead, Shirley.
I just have a quick question for the manager. Will the additional storage over off Greeley Road allow us to keep more of this equipment out of the elements than
Yes.
in the last 5 years?
Yes.
So that might allow us, because we have a habit of stretching fire ladder trucks from 10-year life to 20-year life, and maybe we can stretch lawnmower life if we keep it undercover.
The lawnmowers are kept undercover. A lot of the equipment is undercover, but this will allow just about everything to be undercover.
Good, okay.
But I did want to explain a little bit more about where Bob was going with this, and it's close. As a town, we have about $8.3 million worth of equipment townwide, everything. And every year, we basically look at putting money into our replacement schedule, and that schedule is an equipment reserve account. So some years we do buy a lot of equipment, other years we don't buy any, and it could be 2 or 3 years. At Valhalla, it's the same thing. They have about $880,000 worth of equipment. And lawnmowers are 10 or 15-year items. There are certain items that are even longer than that in life expectancy. So every year when it was in the operating budget, it could spike. It could spike because this year we had a lawnmower and next year we had 3 push mowers or something like that. So the council decided years ago to raise enough to come close to our depreciation schedule, which there it's about $55,000 a year. So we're funding and have been funding about $40,000 a year for probably the last 10 years or so. That money goes into a reserve account, and then every 5 years we come back to the council and say, all right, these are the items that have reached their useful life and they need to be replaced. So I don't want anybody to think we're replacing a $80,000 mower that's 16 feet wide that mows the fairways. Those last 15 to 20 years, and we do take care of them, we do maintain them, but when they get to the end of their useful life, they're basically traded out and scrapped or sold as surplus. So it wasn't very well explained during the Finance Committee, and I think there might have been some misconception that we were replacing all this new equipment every 5 years, which is not the case at all. So, and I just wanted to give you more scope and clarity around those numbers.
Thank you, Bill. That was very helpful. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I think she had,
Allison.
Just, I think the other piece that was shared during the council meeting is normally our assistant manager would come in like January, February, so this is normal course of business, but the timing is different. And as I'm sure many know, there are supply chain issues, and we have a plow truck that we ordered last year that may not get here in time for this winter. So kind of thinking ahead, and actually also the cost of these kind of going up exponentially, we would be able to lock in these prices by kind of making this order now as well. So
That's correct.
I think that's an important point.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion.
Public comment.
Ah, God. All right. This is a public item. Is there anybody who would like to, yes?
I understand it a lot better now, Mr. Shane.
Thank you for the question.
Yep. But I still would like to make a couple of comments about it. Number one, are we giving the town manager a blank check here? Is there any limit to what he can spend? You've not mentioned any in the here anywhere. Is it at his discretion, or how does that work?
I believe there's a total amount here.
correct.
It's not in, is it going to be in the motion? Because it's not on the agenda here.
It's $195,000 is what
Correct.
was requested. And again, this was first presented during the budget process when we went through it. So this was authorized. We're just kind of moving forward 6 months, so.
So we're going to spend would you expect to spend $195,000?
That is correct.
Yep. And on the budget, do you remember how much the loss is for Valhalla on the budget in the budget for '22?
So-
27,000.
We're actually on the plus side again for this year, the second year in a row.
But the budget is negative 127.
That is correct.
Yep. And we're gonna, where does this 194 show up on the financial reports
So what I
when we buy it?
what I explained is that we basically set it aside into a reserve account. We
Yep.
budget $40,000 in the operating account each year.
I know that.
And then
I'm
transfer
saying-
that
I'm
Mr.
saying-
Sherwin, the item before us is to authorize the town manager to,
Oh, okay.
so,
Then I'll do my other stuff through emails,
thank you.
okay? I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry to bother you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Maybe just to clarify that we aren't financing this because the 195,000 is sitting in a savings account, just like we talked about that general fund before. That is
Right.
sitting in a savings account, and so when ready, there's no financing, and that we're kind of paying
right.
ourselves along the way,
Yeah.
collecting interest appropriately, and then when ready, we have the funds to spend.
That's exactly correct.
I would also, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I would like to add just another comment. I think your questions that you raised, Mr. Sherman, are very valid. If in years past, an entity such as Valhalla or others had not been turning a significant profit, I think it's valid to look at the financials and figure out why that is. I'm a golfer myself, and I can tell you that one of the things I do like to see is that there's going to be a snow blower for the greens. A golf course, just like any asset that you have, can deteriorate very quickly over time, and if its greens are not kept up well, if the fairways are not kept up well, people won't join this golf course, they'll join another golf course, and that's lost revenue. So it's one of these things where I feel we need to make sure we're making the right investments to maintain the quality of the course, so that hopefully future revenue continues to grow. But again, I appreciate you bringing all this stuff up, and I've read the email chains back and forth, and I think your questions are,
It goes beyond
Good.
that, though.
of course, and I think we can explore those, but again, as
Yeah.
the chairman said, I think this issue is just to talk about authorizing or executing those purchase agreements. And so I think if we need to fine tune the language here on, we can do that as well. But I think for the most part,
127,000 loss in the budget should affect the number. Should be thought about.
Any further public discussion? See none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a motion. I move to authorize the town manager to execute purchase agreement for Valhalla equipment for the next 5 years, as recommended by the Finance Committee, not to exceed $194,983.55.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, unanimous. Next item is 21-109, just this is discussion regarding the American Rescue Plan funds and to set a public hearing date of November 8th for the purpose of gathering public input as recommended by the Finance Committee. As we had a memo from the town manager and discussion the other night, there was 4 categories, and I can list the categories so that folks can have an idea of where we're looking for input. 4 categories: to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small business, and nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitalities. Second bucket is to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency, providing premium pay to eligible workers. Third category is for the purpose of government services to the extent of the reduction of revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the pandemic. And the fourth category is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So those are the 4 categories that the council will be looking at for public input and ideas. The manager has laid out some guidelines or some recommendations. And if in the first category, recommendation is, from the town manager, is some tax relief, a senior tax relief, mental wellness program, employee mental wellness program, safety glass for the town hall and library. In the second category, where recommendation is for not to participate in that one. Loss of revenue, which is the third category. Again, no funds to be in that one. And then in the fourth category, we're looking to set aside or ask for funding for some broadband improvements. And I believe the one other thing in there is to ask for some funding for infrastructure engineering work. Would that be correct, Bill?
Yeah, or actual work. It's really up to you, and that's why I thought we'd set the public hearing date to hear input from the community and then make your decisions after that. Again, this is not time sensitive today.
So the point of discussion tonight is to set a public hearing for November 8th. This is not a public hearing, but if there are any questions, if I didn't explain it well, I would certainly ask anybody who approached the podium if we didn't explain that well.
Mr. Manager, is there not a category for the recuperation of funds for things like, remember when we started the town garage and we started building it at the very wrong time because of COVID? The prices all went up for labor, for materials, but there's no category to help us recoup any of those.
Initially, we thought that's where we were going to go, and when the final draft came from the federal government, that was not included. So we don't have those type of costs. We were hoping that we could use some of the revenues we lost through the recreation program
Right.
to kind of help, replenish some of those and complete the town garage project. But they tightened that language up to say your overall gross revenues. You cannot just do single out separate programs. It has to be your overall entire revenues have to be in a deficit.
See, I think we're gonna, with the supply chain issues, I think we're gonna end up in the same boat.
Well,
In
we
our
may,
planning
and I think that's
Further,
why,
just looking at, for
we have-
example, the items that are going up that you shared with us for the golf course that
Right.
aren't equipment, just the price of grass seed and
right?
the price of mower blades and
But remember, we have
the cost
2
of doing
years,
business.
2 years to spend the money. So what I'm saying is let's not be in a hurry. Let's
Yeah.
basically plan it wisely, and if the project costs come in too high, we wait another year, because we have 2 years to spend the money. So I think that's why the finance director and I basically said, let's just bank the money and leave it there, help them with cash flow, help in avoiding a tan. So that's all good. So for me, I think we're not in any great rush to get a project out the door. And that's why I think I'm hoping that the public will participate or send you guys emails and just say, hey, what about this or what about that? One of the recommendations that Mr. Sherwin made was daycare centers. There was a lot of daycare centers in our community that closed down, and there's a big demand on that. Should we be looking at trying to help facilitate that in some way, whether through through economic development or through the Tiff districts or whatever? But that's an idea that I thought was worth exploring a little bit. So there are things out there that we just don't know about. Maybe we're just too close to the day-to-day operation that people can approach us and ask for assistance. I think there'll be nonprofits that will reach out to you as well, because they were affected very badly through the pandemic, that we may hear from as well. So that's why until we ask, we won't know.
I think you made a very good point there. I'm not an economist, but I do subscribe to a builder's professional journal, and kind of the barometer for me is benchmarking, and their housing prices are starting to decline, resale, not new homes, but resale homes, and the longer we hold off, I believe the better off we'll be too. Okay. A motion then.
I'll give you a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I move to set a public hearing date of November 8th for the purpose of gathering public input on the use of American Rescue Plan funds as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 21-110, to authorize the town manager to apply for county ARP funds to study the expansion of the Portland Water District water mains throughout the town as recommended by the Finance Committee. So we've had some input from the public regarding water issues in the Bruce Hill area, and as part of that discussion, the Finance Committee felt that it was time to explore what the issues were throughout the community and what it would take to put water lines throughout the community. And so part of this discussion is to ask the town manager to see if we can get some funding for an engineering study to give us a baseline map of what the structure of the how much bedrock there is, how much road length there is, how many homes are impacted, whether these can be addressed by small expansions, whether it's a large expansion, all these issues. So I think I'll let Bill add a little bit to that.
I was hoping that I would be able to pull up a map for you, but it appears that our technology tonight is not going to cooperate with us. I'll continue to try, and I'll try one more time, and if it does it, great. If it doesn't, I'll just explain it. This is the wonderful two-party system we have here that you have to authenticate, and if you ever leave your phone at home, don't try to start your computer. It won't start. So for us, looking at the Bruce Hill Road area, we've been talking about it for, since 2009, when the last comp plan came out. There was definitely a water quality issue and a water quantity issue for that neighborhood, and there's about 165 homes, and I'm talking about the Bruce Hill Road north. If you get up to the fairgrounds coming from Main Street, it's the right-hand side toward the valley, Pleasant Valley and Valley Road. When we were looking at this area, we looked at it pretty closely to say, well, there are issues. Barry Sheff is here tonight from the neighborhood. He and I have been talking about it for years, and I've met with the neighbors there this summer just to listen to their concerns and to talk about process. When we talked about it last week at the Finance Committee, the legitimate question came up, so how do we decide? How do we decide if this is the right place to go? How do we decide if this is, is this worth the investment in the money? And and thank you, computer. It basically came up. So here's the map we developed to basically look at different neighborhoods around the community. And there are 8 areas I identified in town that could be a potential future project for a water line expansion. And I'm not putting them in any order, I'm just numbering them 1 through 8 just to say there are 8 in a number. And each area is somewhere in the $6 to $10+ million range in cost. So this is like a long-range project, a long vision project of where do we go next, what do we do, and that's why we put capital improvement plans together. And they're kind of a joke sometimes because you never get to them in 5 years. It's always funded in the 5th year, no matter what year it is. It always seems to be in the 5th year, and it's because we're just not ready to take that next step. And in our case, we have to be careful of elevation when we talk about water lines because Once you reach a certain elevation of your property, we can't get there with a water line so we can get water to your house. We have to use a booster station, or we have to come from another tank. And that's really important when you're developing the plans, because you want to basically have water on your second floor as well as your first floor, and it all works well when it's under a gravity-fed system. So for us, we want to basically look at pressure, and we want to look at each neighborhood. And what I did is I went through each neighborhood to make sure that it could be fed from one pressure zone, and if it couldn't, then if it needed a booster station, we looked at it. And I'm just going to blow up the map in the middle because it kind of gives the math behind it all. And basically, I went through and checked and put the water mains on all the public roads. State law doesn't allow us to spend money on private property, so it would be difficult to run a water main down a private road, because technically we can't. We have to keep it in the public right-of-way, bring it to the extent of the public right-of-way, leave a little blue cap on your lawn, so that's where you would connect as a homeowner to the water main. So all the zones are listed here, and they basically have, I numbered them 1 through 8, kind of gave you a little description, and it then just showed you what the cost estimate was based on. When I met with the Portland Water District to discuss the Bruce Hill Road, Valley Road, Pleasant Valley Road area, their estimations were what they use for this type of just preliminary engineering is about $400 a foot and about $500,000 a pump station. That's way higher than we use here to estimate, but I'm just going to take their numbers and just run with it because I did it community-wide. And community-wide, it comes into about a $70 million price tag if we tried to bring town water to these 8 different sections of town. That's a lot of pipe. It's over 170,000, nearly 170,000 feet of pipe, and an additional 4 pumping stations. So that's what it would be comprehensively. But what we don't know when we do this is what exactly is that going to cost us? And what I tried to share with the Finance Committee is the first step in, say, the Bruce Hill Road neighborhood would be to do some preliminary engineering. And that would be to go out and actually drill, like we did on Pleasant Valley Road when we fixed the drainage on the hill there, but drill every 50 feet and take a boring so we know that how deep is the ledge? Is it 10 feet? Is it 2 feet? Is it right to the surface? Is it non-existent? If any of you went down Pleasant Valley Road in the past, you'd say, man, you're in a lot of trouble because that ledge is coming right to the surface. There wasn't any ledge when we put that when we put that drainage system in all the way down the hill. We didn't hit refusal until 10 feet. I need about 8 feet to get to the bottom of the ditch for a water main. We try to basically get no more than somewhere between 5 and 6 feet of cover over the top of the water main so we don't have frost issues. Because remember, it's in the pavement area or usually an open area. They like to be 8 feet off the center line, so we don't want them to be frozen if we have a bad winter and a very cold and a very deep frost. So a lot of that information you can't gather by just looking at maps or at the water district maps. So for me, I think when I kind of narrow in on your neighborhood, and most of you folks are from this neighborhood, you can see some of the some of the issues are well, there's nothing you can do about it. It's elevation. So when I look at your neighborhood, we typically have 2 zones right now in your section, a green zone and a tannish zone, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but we can easily feed one side of the neighborhood, and here's the fork right where my little hand is, and this side would be Valley Road that would go all the way up to Pleasant Valley Road. All that can be fed off the existing Blanchard Road water main system. But what we run into is where we really have the problem is on Bruce Hill Road. When you head toward Pleasant Valley Road this way, following my hand, as soon as you hit that red area, and I think it's showing up in red, yes it is, that's when we run out of problem. That's when we run into problems. We just don't have enough pressure to basically push that water up to the top of that hill, and that would require a booster home for, I think we said 30 or so homes on that side. So that booster station would be somewhere right at the fork in the road, and the town does own some property there. So that was a good move to keep that and not sell that. So It would be a small pump station similar to what would be like on Blanchard Road. That pump station would basically handle all these homes that basically come up to Pleasant Valley and then come down the hill until it hits the tan again. And when it hits the tan, it can be fed off the other system. So it's the 407 system. This would have to be somewhere around 460 feet in elevation to make this work. So when the difference between the elevation of your home and the elevation of the pump station is less than 90, that's when we get into problems for pressure. So it's really important that we look at that, and that's what a preliminary design report would do. It would basically look at those, it would look at the ledge, and then it would actually go in and actually physically locate where your wells are, so we know what the distance from the street to your well is. And in many cases, some of your wells are not near the street, they're out back behind the house or on the side of the house. That's problematic because when you're doing these big projects, you also have to look at what's going to be your personal cost to connect. And that cost is from where our little stub is at your property line to your home. If your well is like 20 feet from the road and we can get to it very easily, your costs are going to be much cheaper than the person who has the well behind their home. So there's a lot of those type of things that will be addressed in the report as well. So what we talked about at the Finance Committee meeting is, again, trying to come up with a strategy or a recommendation from an engineer to say, how do we prioritize this? And the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, it's really going to be toward, what are our objectives, what are our goals? Are they fire protection? Because while it may be cheaper to give everybody a well and any kind of a disinfection system or whatever, or a softener or whatever you want to do in your home, that does nothing for fire protection. The only thing that fire protection is served by is by water main distribution systems and hydrants. So at some time, we're going to have to look at that. So is it fire protection to me, always has been our primary goal. And then behind that is, economic development. Are there economic development opportunities to enhance this area? In your case, in Bruce Hill Road, probably not. It's going to be residential. But in other areas of town, that might be the tipping point where we could get a business or not get a business. So we'll have to develop that criteria once we have some more information. So my thoughts were to go after the ARP funds that the county is basically making available. I have to submit an application by November 5th, preliminary application, it's a very simple application, to see if we could qualify for some funding there. And if we could qualify for funding there, we could use this as a template for how to basically put together these engineering studies in the future. We want water quality analysis. We want gallons per minute of each pump. We want locations of wells. We want, what's it gonna take? A pump station, no pump station? Where is our biggest bang for the buck? And that will kind of be our a jumping off point, if you will, for a future template for plans. Now, at $70 million, we're not going to be doing this all at once, and we're probably not going to be doing these more than once every 10 or 15 years. And that's the reality. To aggressively go forward just would be irresponsible because we really don't have a great plan. But how big of a problem is this problem? Is the information that we've been presented today just anecdotal, or is it real? I have a tendency to believe it's probably closer to factual, but until we get the data and we get the water analysis of each of those wells, I think it would be, not prudent to move forward until we, have that information in hand. A preliminary design report would give us that information, would set a way to go forward. Everything I'm describing to you right now is exactly what we did on Middle Road. We went out and measured the ledge. We went out and measured each drawdown on each one of the wells. We measured the water quality. We did water quality tests that are not the $35 sample you drop off at the lab. These are more expensive tests that measure radon and a lot of uranium and a lot of the other products that are in the ground that you don't measure with your standard water drinking test. So we want to know what that is. We have high radon in our town, and it's not just in the air, it's also in the water, and those things have to be mitigated with very expensive treatment systems. And while the treatment systems are, upwards of $10,000 and $15,000 in many cases, again, it gets back to, quality of life, quality of living. So there's a lot that can be gained from a report that could be funded with ARP funds. And I know we all pay for these monies, but what I'm saying is I'd rather have us take a share of that pie than our neighbors all steal it. So, not that they're in line to run away with all the money, but if we have the opportunity to get some of this ARP money to study this, use this as a future template, I'd like to be very thoughtful in our process and very thoughtful in how we lay out the scope of these services so that, we can duplicate this, throughout the town. So that's my overall speech. I'll leave this map up, but it's really based on the Finance Committee meeting, which, while leaving it, I knew there was a lot of work to do, but I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you guys put into, thinking about the town as a whole, because I don't know if we ever really had that discussion until the other day. And I think there's still a lot more to talk about, and I think there's still a lot more of what you'd like to see and how you'd like to move forward.
Thank you. This is not a public hearing, but given by the number of people here that are here this evening, I will take some limited comments from a few people if there's a question or if there's a comment. Would anybody like to address the council?
I'll start.
Name and address, please.
Hopefully my neighbors, I won't be the only person. Barry Chef, 254 Bruce Hill Road, and I appreciate the presentation. And I would ask that as you consider this, you also consider, should the county not choose to fund this project, that this really be on your radar. This is not a new project. It's, as the manager said, has been in the comprehensive plan since 2009, this area in particular. And it's the right thing to do. We have a problem. We're asking for the council's help. We're asking for the town's help to solve this. Thanks.
Anyone else?
My name is Beth Germond. I live at 196 Bruce Hill. I live in one of the smaller homes, no elevation, first-story living or one-story living, and just my daughter and myself. I moved here just under 2 years ago and had the water tested, and it was okay enough. I grew up on a well and didn't see any issue. However, since that time, it's gotten increasingly, the volume has gone down terribly. And the reason I'm standing up right now, and I never want to choose public speaking, ever. I apologize for being late, but when I got here at 7:24, and I have hot water baseboard heating, by the way, and just turned on my heat yesterday. So my daughter texted me, just so you know, there is absolutely no water coming out of the shower right now. Like, I just tried to turn it on, and it's just drips. And I mean, there's two of us living in a house. And, I came from a town where we did have public water. And I thought, okay, I'm one person, I'm a single mom, I don't use much water, and I'm shocked. And now we're waiting, I'd said, wait a while. The recharge is a ridiculous time, and not to mention the fire suppression. I had a house fire before, and that scares me. That scares me a lot. And one of my daughter's closest friends had her house burned down today. It's pretty close to home. And, water quality of living, obviously everybody wants that and it's important, but so is, not being fearful of living in our home, and not that the town can't provide the protection we need. So, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Sir.
Thanks for hearing us. I'm John Emery at 243 Bruce Hill Road, and I missed the previous hearings. It was a perfect segue to my story where When we bought the property, we did all the usual tests for the water, and we found that we had radon, and we negotiated mitigating that ourselves through the contract with the seller. And then last summer, we ran out of water. Same problem that she's having, and ended up re-drilling our well last summer. So this project may not even benefit me exactly in the near future, but I support it anyways because I do think it's the right way to spend community funds. There are other water projects. I noticed these other colors on the map have probably been funded somehow through community funds, and they aren't benefiting me directly. So I think that this is something that the town should consider strongly supporting.
Thank you. Okay, so the,
Mr. Chairman, I think we have one more.
oh, go ahead.
Jeff Cameron, 250 Bruce Hill Road. My wife sent over an email as well, so yeah. And I just wanted to mention that, and I understand there are probably concerns, and I went into this buying a house here with eyes wide open. I mean, we understand that it's on well water, and there's a certain level of risk to that, but and it's not, I understand it's from a selfish perspective as well because it affects me, but I'm also one of many at this point, and the concern I have 3 really young kids, and the water quality seems to be changing. I mean, just this past week, our neighbors up the road discovered that they have incredibly high levels of uranium, and so even if we're testing the water, say monthly, I'm not going to let my kids drink the water because it seems to be changing. Their water was fine, now it's really high in uranium. So my kids can't drink the water because I don't want them to drink it for a period of time in between tests if it changes. So that leaves me in kind of a pickle. I mean, it's a tough spot. We live in a really nice community. There are a lot of great amenities, great schools, and yet I can't cook or have my kids drink the water. And yeah, it's just it's something that I think, from a safety perspective, for a neighborhood and for the kids in the community, should be looked at pretty diligently. So, thank you.
Okay, the Finance Committee actually did address the topic of whether there was no ARP funding or not, and we will take that up at our budget process, early winter, late spring, late winter, early spring, I guess is be the more accurate way of saying it. So that has been bandied about already. Oh, anyways, back to the task at hand. We need to authorize the town manager to apply for these funds, and I will entertain a motion.
You get Ron on the end.
Ron?
Mr. Manager, I'll give you a motion, but I just want to make one comment. I live on the Mill Road in West Cumberland, and I live on a 3-acre parcel, and I have 3 wells on 3 acres. There is nothing more aggravating than running out of water. When I built my house, I had 2 kids. I now have 3. I built my house, had the well drilled before I moved into the house. Moved into the house, the first week the well went dry. Oh, great. I didn't have a lot of money when I built my house. Spent all this money, the well's gone dry. Call up the well driller's gone out of business. Sorry. So call up my friend Rick Story, comes down with an excavator, and we start digging holes all over the backyard, and we found a vein of water, so we put in a dug well. If it wasn't for a friend, I don't know what I would have done. Well, we had a dry summer, and that well went dry. And I said, well, enough of this, so I went and drilled another well. Luckily, my 3rd well is 550 feet deep, and I have 6 gallons a minute. When the town water came down over Morrison Hill, I was excited. I live on the Mill Road, and I said, God, I'm gonna run a pipe from Route 100 down Mill Road and up Interurban Drive, which is 550 feet. Well, when I got the price of that, I said, I guess I'm not. But there is nothing more aggravating than running out of water, and I feel for every one of you folks, and the quality of water, too, is another thing. I do have town water at my shop. It's the best thing that ever happened. When we lose the power, we still have water. It's just great. I will give you a motion, and hopefully this will help you guys get on the right track. So Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the town manager to apply for county ARP funds to study the expansion of the Portland Water District water mains throughout town as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? Shirley?
I'm in a similar boat as Ron. I live off Middle Road, and Middle Road was appointed for water decades ago. We had summer water for a while, that you can still see places where the pipe comes up. And even after my brother's house burned flat to the ground, it still took a while for public water to come down Middle Road. So if you have a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 11-month-old, it might be worth your while to go to Air and Water Quality or Culligan or someone in the meantime. I'm just saying, my water was high in nitrate and nitrogen, and that's because I lived at the bottom of an old cow pasture. That has changed over the years, and I've just recently updated my water filtration system, and I didn't need 2 things of salt. I only need 1 thing of salt now, but it was worth the peace of mind to have that with when my kids were babies. So don't wait, because this project, even if approved, could be 4, 5, 6 years. And that's just parent to parent.
All right.
And even with relatives in the business, it was going to cost me $40,000 to run public water to my house.
Well, you know what they say, sometimes friends are better than relatives.
Yeah,
so.
maybe.
Just one comment before I would like to thank the town manager because we met on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I think I drove by yesterday and may have seen a certain pickup truck in the parking lot. So I just want to thank you for so quickly turning your analysis around and kind of pulling. I know you said all the data was there, but that took time and you turned it around so quickly ahead of this meeting. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, Allison, he probably just saved us $10,000 to $20,000 in engineering fees. It is really good if you're hiring an employee to get a 2-for-1. We have a manager who's also a professional engineer, and we all super appreciate that.
You're good now.
All right. One more story, I guess. 50-some years ago, my folks built a house on Greeley Road Extension. It was a dirt road, and there was no public water. And my father tried to have a well drilled and couldn't. And he paid, at the time, $900 to extend the water line down to our house. And while that doesn't sound like much, it was 10% of the cost of our new home. It's water has always been an issue in Cumberland, and it still is. So, anyways, we hear you. We hear it from everybody in Cumberland. My own neighbors included have poor wells. My well is. I've got plenty of water. It's just not good water. All right. We have a
Well,
motion.
Mr. Chairman, before you beat yourself up too badly, that map has doubled in the last 15 years in
Yeah.
water expansion through our community. So it has been a priority of the town council to expand fire protection, so water doesn't have to be hauled in with a tanker truck to a fire. So we're all a lot safer in our community for the work the council has bravely moved forward with. And as I think you guys have done a fantastic job. We've doubled that map in color. Half of that green wasn't there, none of that brown wasn't there just 10 years ago. So we're doing the right thing. And now we just have to basically prioritize and look at how we can expand in the future and how we look at, expanding fire protection for the whole community. It'll take time, but at least we'll have a plan. And thank you, Allison, for bringing up the point, because I thought it was really, I don't think we ever really sat back and said, well, yeah, how do we pick that? How do we pick, because we've never had 3 neighborhoods ever come in and say, hey, we want water, we want water. I'm sure everybody would want water, but, maybe in the near future, we'll have a plan and we can prioritize it, and we'll use you guys hopefully as the guinea pig, so.
All right. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 21-111, to authorize the town manager to apply for future ARP fund monies with the state and federal government for economic development projects as recommended by the Tiff committee. And I have to plead ignorance on this one, thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to jump in. This is a very similar discussion to what we just had on water. The TIF committee met briefly and said, directed me to say, look, if we can apply for any of the ARP funds to maximize any of our TIF districts, Route 100 or Route 1 in particular, let's not be late to the game. Let's jump ahead of that so we're prepared and ready to go. If we have to use TIF monies to get those applications ready, let's use them, because we could potentially leverage millions of dollars that we might be missing if we were asleep at the wheel. I think the real infrastructure, and I say real infrastructure, the pipe, the paving, the ground, the excavation work, I think that bill is coming through the federal, at the federal level, hopefully in the next few weeks. And if we see that happen, I've talked to the DOT commissioner as well, and he said he's going to be in a position that he wants to fund good projects, not just bridge decks, things that actually show, community development, that show economic development. And working with the TIF committee, I think we're going to basically bring you hopefully some plans in the very near future that will be exciting and be relevant to our entire community. So they basically gave me the direction to say, let's get back to the council, see if everybody's on board, and let's move forward with some real economic development opportunities that could be available. And, this could be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. If we miss the boat here, then shame on us, I think. So I don't want to miss the boat. I really want to be prepared, and I think we've got some great ideas, and hopefully by the early next year, we'll be ready to present some to you.
Very good.
We could
Anybody like to
open the
make a
public-
motion?
Open the public hearing.
Right.
They all left
Weird
us.
house.
It must have been something I said.
Chair, I've been thinking a lot about this issue. I see messages from GPCOG urging us to get prepared to advocate for broadband expansion and all of those things. But as is always the case when I go outside of Cumberland, Saginaw, or York County, I'm just so aware of the different mains. For us to improve broadband expansion, at what cost to the rest of Maine for that? And it feels like, for me, it feels like an ethical issue. There are places in our state who can't even get dial-up on their phones at a speed enough to download something our town manager might email them. And so I'm not going to oppose this, obviously. I think I have to act on behalf of the citizens of Cumberland, but I think we need to be really mindful. It sounds like a lot of money, but as we know, when you start putting shovels in the ground, it's not a lot of money for those kind of infrastructure things. So I just want us to be thoughtful for the rest of our citizens in Maine when we go looking for financial support.
Well, when I saw the improvements in, I think it was Belgrade, and when I drove through there, that's on the way to Sugarloaf, right? Driving through, I was in awe of what they did to their downtown. That was all done with DOT funds. So, and I've seen more and more infrastructure improvements the further away you get from the population of the state. So what I'm saying is I think DOT is doing a good job in trying to spread out the pot of money and putting projects all across the state. I think they are aware of that. I agree with you on some of the other programs. It's, I hate to use the analogy, pigs at a trough, basically everybody trying to attack to get to a very small pie. That I totally agree with you, and I think that's why your point, Mr. Chair, to work regionally and put monies together in a regional perspective,
Even
not a town.
regionally, for us, you compare
Well,
us regionally to
very
someplace
powerful.
like Dover, from Dover Foxcroft to Milo, where I drove this week.
Right,
You know, and people have plastic over their windows to help keep out the cold.
right, right.
You know, where an energy upgrade would really benefit those people, but they don't know, they don't have the resources to even access those things.
It's a lot about advocacy, and that's the problem, is that advocacy is the further you get out, it seems the weaker it becomes,
And they
that's really
sometimes
sad.
need their communities, their towns. There are a lot of people in our town that wouldn't know about the benefits of Efficiency Maine if we weren't here talking about our own solar panels and leading the way, you know, and advocating for that. And
And I think that's why you're as desirable of a community as you are. I think we have got a great staff here. We've got a council that it thinks ahead and is not
Yeah.
putting the roadblocks up every time something costs $10,000 or whatever the number is. I think we have invested very wisely in our community, and I think we're setting ourselves up for the future.
And I agree. I just want us to be ethical and thoughtful when we move forward.
Okay, don't get that booster shot.
Well, if I can just kind of piggyback on that a little bit, I think, you know, you mentioned there are two mains. I also think at a certain level, there are even two Cumberlands. I mean, it depends on how far down you kind of push that microscope. And so I think as a TIF committee, we were very thoughtful about, you know, assuming funds are even procured, let's make sure we're using them for the areas of the town that need them the most. And so I think that's an area that we, you know, if we're fortunate enough to receive funds, we want to make sure that it's not going for,
Thank you.
I guess, top
Yeah.
layer
Right.
fluff benefits, if you even want to call them that. Broadband's a utility, a necessary
Right.
utility in my mind at this point, but I think that's something we want to be very cautious of as a TIF committee.
That's right on, Mark, very right on. I couldn't agree more. That being said, it's our duty to the citizens of Cumberland to make sure that we are going after every dollar that's available for us.
Right.
And then secondly, where do we spend that? But all those comments are appreciated. All right, let me have a motion, please.
I'll give it to you. I move to authorize the town manager to apply for future ARP fund monies with the state and federal government for economic development projects as recommended by the TIF committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Thank you. Last item, 21-112. To consider an act on authorizing the town manager to sign an amended agreement between the town of Cumberland and Maine Public Employees Retirement Trust to allow non-participating employees who previously declined to participate in Maine PERS as recommended by the Finance Committee. So we have the town has a retirement plan as such, or a defined, and anyways, employees could either opt in or opt out as they chose. We have something that was, for the sake of simplifying it, something like a 401K, but it's got another letter to it, and I'll let
457, 457.
457.
457. But, so anyways, the state has said that those people who were not in our defined plan could now come in within a 5-year window and participate. It's a little bit different, there's some different withholding and tax implications, but it allows people that, who changed their mind and said, I want into this Maine state retirement system. And I think I better let Bill. give
You're
it a
very
look.
close, though, you're very close. Maine PERS is what they refer to, that's the Maine State Retirement Plan. Maine PERS is a defined benefit program, so if you make your contributions, which are typically between 8 and 9% as an employee, and you retire with the town and you've been there 25 years, it's 2% per year, you'll get 50% of your highest 3-year salary. That's what the retirement plan allows, and that's why they call it a defined benefit plan. The other plan we have is with the ICMA, Institute for City Managers Association. It's changed now, and I never remember the name. Mission Square, that should be very easy, but that plan allows the employee to contribute up to 7%, and the town will match up to 7% in a 457 plan, like a 401, but you basically, they put their money in, and then they get to invest it the way they want to. If they're young, they may be a lot more aggressive with their investments. If they're old like me, it'll probably be a lot lower in the risk category. So that's really up to the employee, and we have people every year that come in from Mission Square. And that Brenda sets up, and she gets everybody straight, and everybody leaves happy. They do a great job with that plan. So this plan, however, on main PERS, on the defined benefit plan, it used to be, when you were hired, if you didn't choose to take it, within the first 30 days of being hired, you never had another opportunity to get back in, as long as you were with that employer. If I went to a different town, I could opt up again, but then I'd start from, after so many years. This plan allows the employee to jump into the retirement plan, and it's a little different because of the IRS. Their contributions are post-tax, so they don't get the tax benefit of everybody else that signed up on day one, or the people in the 457, which is pre-tax. So it's a little bit different. And when they take their money out, they don't get taxed on the money they put in, but they will be taxed on our money. So it's a little bit of a twist. The main PERS got a little pressure from a lot of employers because their employees wanted to join the plan, and they brought this to the legislature. They agreed and brought this plan forward. So it's not going to be implemented, Brenda, until July, if the council, July 1st. So there's really no cost implication to us this year. So staff is agreeing that it makes kind of sense to kind of complement the rest of the retirement plans we have, and we don't really see a lot of people, maybe one or two at the most, that would take advantage of this, but it it helps us in the future too. So that's it in a short nutshell.
Much better than my effort. Okay, any discussion, or can we move to a motion? Ronnie?
I'll give you a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move to authorize the town manager to sign an amended agreement between the town of Cumberland and Maine Public Employees Retirement Trust to allow non-participating employees with optional membership who previously declined to participate in Maine PERS as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Second.
Somebody? Mark? Second by Mark. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay. On to new business. Before we get to know business, I want to personally say how pleased I am with working with all of you. I think tonight was just a fine example of some of you picking up the loose ends and putting the emphasis on the employees of this community where it should be. The efforts of the town manager over the weekend. Too often, I'm guilty of just playing dumb and not recognizing the people that have really done the work. So anyways, thanks to all of us. So Allison is my right arm. Sometimes I think she's both arms, but we had a little meeting the other day, and there's a lot on our plate. We're trying to do a lot of things. We're getting educated about the possibility of putting a senior retirement assisted living facility in this community. We're trying to do bring business into town. We're trying to facilitate conversations with North Yarmouth and by extension, Yarmouth and Falmouth with collaboration. And what I don't want to do is I don't want us to get bogged down and lose sight of what we're trying to do and accomplish. And anyways, so Allison has kind of put a worksheet together, and I will ask you to get this to everybody. So I think we have a meeting tomorrow night, which is all of us, and I hope everybody comes. And I think after that, we may consolidate the group and maybe take a core group to take the program or the ideas forward and allow somebody else to not have to come to all those meetings. And then, so I'm just gonna read down through this. This is my starting point?
Yeah.
It's not at the top of the page, Bob. All right, so, survey update. We want to get this is by November, distributed by the end of November, and leave open till the second week of January, a survey. Consolidated and updated Cumberland business list by the end of November, that's Mark and Ron. November 10th, joint standing committee. Allison and I talked a little bit about that. We're going to put the heat to the select board in North Yarmouth to make these meetings a little bit more frequent and a little more substantive. All right, and as part of that, we're asking for ideas on opportunities for shared services, and we talked with Bill about this. We want to emphasize what we already do, and then we want to come up with a short list of what we can do. And senior tax programs, we met with that this evening before the council meeting. Pretty exciting stuff there. I think we'll be able to bring something, we said, 1st of December, something to the public?
I think so, yeah.
We talked this evening about the water, townwide water project. We're looking to have a review in January. Climate action plan, again, that's something to have a report out in January, and then the phase 2 in March. The elder care, back to that again, talking with our legislative folks and see what we can get from them.
Mr. Chair, may I ask about your first item, the survey? You're not talking about the survey for the comp plan, are you, or? Because we don't
Yes.
even have a comp plan committee put
We don't,
together
and
yet.
so this is, we're gonna get Kyler in here again, and we're going to do a short survey that hopefully will give us an idea of whether we need to move forward with a full comp
Okay.
plan.
The surveys are so tricky. That was one of the things you remember, we were really given a great deal of caution
Yep.
about surveys the last time we did a comp plan.
Yep.
And that we really be able to target everybody. If it goes out like a Survey Monkey or something, then we're gonna have a third of our residents not access it.
Well, the conversation that we've had is, I guess to bring everybody up to speed, is we would do a mailer
Okay.
to notify everybody that there is a survey. I think Allison
And
gave,
then also do the hard copies, just like we did the, whichever survey we did
Yeah.
before. but-
I just know that when we did the last comp plan survey, we hired some people to help us write the survey.
Yep, so
To make sure that we weren't
Bias.
overly biased one direction or another, or if we wanted to be biased, you know, where do our biases as town leaders
Yep.
lead us, knowing,
Right.
understanding we may have a different perspective.
Yeah, so the plan is, so we have said questions, and while some are clearly very specific and out of date, there's many others that we can very easily just leverage. So the goal is to be able to have Whitney, I think it's most efficient to just get it all into SurveyMonkey, because she can print it from there, and that way it's easy for us to kind of scrap the ones we don't want, instead of having to like duplicate, like type it all into Word and then get into SurveyMonkey. But that we would then kind of come to the council and say, okay, here's kind of the buckets, because right now, all we have is the report, which is kind of not an easy way to like read through what the questions
No,
were.
I know, but it synthesized everything
Yep.
for us, so that
Yep.
we didn't have to spend hours and hours doing that ourselves as
Yep.
well.
Yep, so, Bill was saying it too, I was like, I can do this. But I think the first is the survey. To Bob's point, I think the goal would be to understand which areas of the comp plan need to be refreshed, because the thought is not, probably all of them do not have to be refreshed, so trying to get a sense of what's changed in the community.
Right.
Sentiments that's changed, demographics that's changed, just overall priorities, and then be able to kind of go from there and say, okay,
Okay,
talk about bias, because I think we probably all have bias on which areas of the comp plan need to get refreshed, but to really kind of have the survey as a basis. But kind of the hard work was done when you guys did it back in 2007 of, just like you said, getting a professional to phrase the questions. And now that we have them,
I think the concern on my part is looking at a full-blown comprehensive plan again, is that it's a slog. It requires a lot of man-hours, a lot of input. It's
does.
a lot of
it does.
everything.
It's
and-
comprehensive.
Yes, yes, so, I think.
And I don't want to push it. I don't want
No.
to rush it.
And that's why I think if we do a preliminary survey,
Okay,
we can,
thank you. I just wanted to understand having been through the process before, I wanted to understand your thinking
Yep.
with pushing this survey.
and I'm obviously open to suggestions and input from everybody.
Your timing is really difficult, only because we're going to be preparing very shortly to start the budget process again for FY23. I just need a little bit more detail what your thoughts are. We'll pull it together, because the last time we did this was $40,000 just for the survey. And that was 2007 or 9 or whenever it was, but it was a while ago,
It
so.
started, the survey was probably 2007. We had the plan done in 2009.
So I like the idea of not reinventing the wheel with all those
Right.
questions, but they all did match up to different chapters, which was really important. And I think market decisions, I wish they were still around, because they did a phenomenal job for us.
Is
So-
Judy Colby George still around?
Yeah, Judy is, and so is it Jim Demekis? I see him a lot on LinkedIn. He's started his own company too. We can reach out to a couple of people to get you some just cost estimates so that we can pull it together, because what was really important last time is that we didn't get the ballot box stuffed. There were unique return codes on every envelope that came back, so that you couldn't just fill out 10 of these and just submit them, and because you wanted your road paved or something like that. So it was really well done, and they did a
Right.
great job kind of guiding us through that process. So that's just going to take a little bit of time. So if that survey, I think you were looking to get it out in January or November?
November, if we were gonna leverage the existing, would be by the end of November, so that we're getting feedback back on prioritization by January, to then inform the budget process around how much of a refresh are we talking about.
So if you were looking just to get the questions up on SurveyMonkey, okay,
Yeah,
that's the piece I missed. So just the questions, and
And
who's,
then close it like mid-January, giving folks enough time, knowing that it's holidays and stuff, so that was.
yeah,
the
it
date.
kind of just gives us kind of almost a thumbnail sketch of where things are going, which might give us a better direction. But who is selecting the questions? are we doing all the questions we did last time? Or have you kind of culled out the questions that are not relevant
We would like to sit down with,
with the council
yes.
and do that? Okay. All right, that was really the only questions I had, so. So really, at this
Haven't
point,
run
it's
them up
really,
yet.
well, it's really staff cost at this point, if you're just doing SurveyMonkey, and we can help with the technology piece of it, but
Well, I'd be concerned about validity of responses too. Remember how we coded just, I mean, I don't think we have much of a worry, but there could be a target item, a target question that people, you never know. People start talking about it on Facebook, and I'm just, I don't want these decisions made in social media.
right, but those that don't use social media
I know,
or
we
our apps.
also need to have a voice.
So we would have surveys available at Town Hall, the library, rec department,
Right.
just so people could grab one if they didn't fill it out online.
And the
Okay.
thought would be, just like we did that other survey about kind of engagement, the postcard seemed very cost effective. I think it was $1,200 to send the postcard to every resident to say, because then they could just go to the website. So if they weren't, because obviously I think we emailed every crier subscriber just about the survey. It was in the crier. We did the postcard.
I think that's a great idea.
And then we also did it on social media
Yeah,
to
but-
encourage participation. And we had the hard copies.
We had good return too, I mean,
Yep,
so.
yeah, the response rate wasn't bad. It was a much shorter survey, so it'll be, obviously SurveyMonkey's a little bit easier clicking and stuff, but it will be a longer survey than what we did last time, so.
So in addition to that what you guys looked at for the questions we had last time, we also had a book that was double the thickness just of the comments that went with a lot of that. We won't be able to do really comments effectively with SurveyMonkey. That would be very difficult if we were going to input all those by staff, all the handwritten ones, but, if that's just,
Oh, meaning if someone did a hard copy?
Paper
Right.
copy,
Is that what you're saying?
right, that's the tricky part.
transcribing that over,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
figuring
yeah.
out how to run that data and figure it,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
so, I mean, there might be some little blips, but, for the most part, I think you'll get a snapshot of what, where the pulse of the community is, and maybe that's enough to get started, but.
Okay, I've talked enough. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple things to brief people on, but before I get started, first I would like to apologize publicly to Mr. Bruce Sherwin of Blanchard Road. I was told by one of my valued colleagues tonight that I may have called him Mr. Bruce Sherman, and that may have been the second time that I've slipped up on that, so no disrespect meant by that, and my apologies. So in terms of just updates to the council as to where we're at on things, I think you alluded to it. Before the town council meeting tonight, we had a kind of a senior property tax assistance program workshop here. I don't know if it was a formal workshop, but a get-together to talk about where we are in terms of coming up with creative solutions to help some of our more vulnerable economic citizens, seniors in our town, stay in their homes. And so without getting to a lot of specifics on it, I think in the next maybe month or so, maybe by early December, we should be able to come to the council with a formal plan as to what that looks like. We're kind of working behind the scenes now with the attorneys on some of the draft ordinance language just to make sure everything's up to snuff and in alignment with any state authorizing statutes. So we had that meeting tonight. On the open for business side of things, I had a really great meeting with the town manager and Councilor Kopp on the 13th. And we started just with a big picture educational walkthrough of every plot of land that we have that is currently zoned for business right now. The town manager, I think, did a great job of simplifying it for me. Color coding everything, making it like I was a 3-year-old, which was wonderful because that's exactly what I needed. If something was already developed and a business was sitting in there, it was just blank. If there was a potential opportunity for a business, it was green. He knows a lot of this information at his fingertips, so it was helpful for me, and I'm guessing Councilor Kopp to kind of walk through that and figure out where are the areas of town that are, again, currently zoned for business that don't have a business there, and what we can do big picture to try to draw or attract the right types of businesses there. And this actually ties into kind of one of the issues we looked at tonight, which is some ARP funds to study some government and economic development projects throughout town. And so it's specifically tied to that issue. So I think you just mentioned that one of the requirements, Mr. Chairman, that you'd like is by, I believe you said, the end of November, to have an updated business list. That's something we can work on a little bit. I don't know how much has changed there. The initial meeting that we had was really to focus on the plots of land specifically that were available for new businesses, not really indexing the current businesses, but I think that's something we also can get done. And then finally on, let's see, the 18th, so last Monday, we've got quite a few meetings, but last Monday we had another follow-up meeting with Maine State Housing Authority. We met with Eric Jorgensen, as you recall, and Mark Wiesendanger, who both work for Maine Housing, to talk a little bit more. Again, we're in the exploratory phases here, just to learn more about what the town of Cumberland might be able to do and what types of arrangements are available for towns that are actively looking for affordable senior care facilities, and kind of what the loopholes there are and what the legal requirements are to get those in place. I do have a follow-up call that I have not made yet to the Office of Aging and Disability Services. I need to reach out to both the folks from Maine State Housing to get some contact information there, but I plan on doing that this week. So those are my updates.
Thank you. Shirley?
I have a few updates as well. I've been, like many of you, I've been following the Rails to Trails media attention. But we also, so the public got information that the state's extending the lease or may extend the lease to the railroad, which would kick that down at least 3 years. But my understanding from the Rails to Trails people is that they're going to proceed with the planning committees that they wanted to put in place already. So it's not dead. It is more hopeful than the media led us to believe that that might happen. I took a drive-around tour of the town garage, and I wonder if we are going to have a council tour or open house or ribbon cutting or something about that in the future.
Paint dries, so you don't get your sticky fingerprints all
Yeah.
over everything. So.
I'm curious, in the water, when we were talking about water mains and this is a conversation we may need to have at another time, but you put down a big number for stormwater repairs on the forest side. And I am so interested in why we have those, because my understanding was that Route 88 was supposed to fix a lot of our stormwater problems on.
Well, it's a really easy answer.
Okay.
It's in Wildwood specifically, where Wildwood and Long Meadows, where in Long Meadows we have some issues with an outfall and some drainage. And Wildwood, we have some small drainage projects that would allow us to pave the roads because of the stormwater repairs with federal monies, and basically try to get our TIF funds back above water, because we've been siphoning off $500,000 a year to pave, and we would stop that and kind of substitute that with ARP money. It was a kind of a one-year, basically,
Okay.
stopgap measure. So it was very specific, related to using ARP monies.
Okay. A reminder to the public, the golfing public, that you have 1 week left to either join or rejoin your membership at Valhalla and save yourself $100. Goes up $100 after October 31st. I didn't know that, but we've been looking at Valhalla, and that was in the information on fees. Mark, I want to thank you for your work. You've done amazing work on that senior tax ordinance, and I sit on the ordinance committee, and I am so glad that that will come to us, if it even comes to us and doesn't just come to the council. Mostly done. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
So, when you're voting, I said earlier, you have a manager who's a professional engineer. We have a counselor who's an attorney, and I miss Steve Moriarty for that reason.
Sure.
So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
And then, just a reminder to the public that Halloween is Sunday, and hunting season, shotgun only, opens on Saturday. So wear your orange, whether it's for Halloween or hunting. That's all I have.
Tom?
A couple things. The food pantry is doing very, very well, and the numbers are coming up again, unfortunately. And here's my $20. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles. Then also, the Coastal Waters Commission is meeting this week, so we'll see how that goes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Just a couple things. Wanted to invite everyone to our next Smash the Stigma event, which is November 16th. It's at 6:30 at the North Yarmouth Community Center. This is a full family-friendly event. 2 new local businesses to North Yarmouth, the Zen Center Acupuncture and New Frontiers Chiropractic. They're right on Route 9. They are hosting, so they're going to do a little intro on acupuncture and chiropractic, but their kind of mental health support is really about getting the community together for some fun. So most of it that they're really focusing on is the trivia. They're going to do a trivia night and have kind of prizes from local community businesses. So I do invite folks to come. It's only, I think, slotted to be an hour, so hopefully those with children, 6:30 to 7:30, will still be able to get home in time for bedtime. So that's November 16th. The other one is December 8th, and this one I'm actually, why I'm announcing it now is not only to put on your calendars, December 8th, 6 to 8 at the Greeley Performing Arts Center, is that we're also looking for submissions for this event. So the title of this event is Mental Health Has No Face, and I would like to probably presume, and sadly fairly accurately, that especially during COVID, mental health and the struggles of mental health have really become prominent and probably have touched most of us, if not personally, very closely, directly through this pandemic. And so the invitation is for folks to submit a poem. And when we say poem, it doesn't have to rhyme, it doesn't have to be a certain length, but it is a poem about how kind of mental health and the struggles with mental health have touched you. The invitation is to submit these. You can actually submit them to me personally, but they will be held anonymous. So hopefully you feel confident in that. And then we have invited, and we'll have high schoolers and other local community members read them during the event. So you do not have to read your own piece. You're more than welcome to. But it really is about just getting the submissions from our community, all ages, all genders, to really just kind of share their story and have those different faces up in front of us as part of that event. So again, submissions we're actively soliciting them, so please do submit them. And again, the event is December 8th from 6 to 8. And that's all I have.
2 or 3 different things. First of all, Tom, thank you for the $20, and here's my 20. At the last meeting, I offered to give the town manager 1 lump sum for my donation every meeting, but he said it was better that I do it every meeting because it reminds people that we do accept donations. So, Bill, here's my $20. Brenda, thank you. On October 20th, the town lost a pretty valuable guy. Mark Kuntz was a previous town councilor. He passed away from some medical complications. Mark, I believe, served 3 terms, or was it 2, Bill, on the council?
At least 2. He was on my hiring committee.
Yeah, I think he was on 3 different terms. He was actually a reserve police officer in the town of Cumberland when I was a younger person. Mark was a good guy, married into the Cop family years ago, and was very well known, and condolences to his wife, Brenda. One more thing, the last day for absentee voting, Bill, when is that?
This Thursday.
I just want to comment, my wife sent in for absentee ballots. They came to the house in 2 days, filled them out. She just texted me, wanted to make sure I put them in the box out front tonight, which I did. Just simple. I mean, why anybody doesn't do it is beyond me. I mean, very, very simple. Just saves you standing in a line down here, and it works really well. So kudos to you guys, and that is all I have.
You mentioned something to me today about perhaps using part of the field across the Stiles Way by a young farmer group. Would you like to?
Sure. So I've been in contact with the lady who runs the nonprofit Farm to Table for Kids, Stephanie McDonough, who's a Cumberland resident. Awesome, lot of energy. You just, come very caffeinated because she is like off the ceiling. She's an awesome person, will get you very excited about farming. And I walked her over to our parcel next door, that 10-acre site. She was very excited. She's putting together a proposal. I reached out to Mike Schwint. As you know, any use of town lands goes first through the LCC. He's really excited about it as well. It kind of goes to our agricultural theme, trying to teach our kids and try to get that type of program here in Cumberland. She runs a program up at the Skyline Farms in North Yarmouth. There's 400 kids in that program in the summers. It sells out in minutes when it's advertised. I'd love to basically duplicate that here and work with Stephanie on bringing this here. I think it would be fantastic for the food pantry. They'll be raising fresh vegetables that we can use here, and they'll also participate in the farmers market. So talk about just all kinds of different things of teaching a kid about agriculture, from actually growing it to the sales to the generosity of a nonprofit. I think it's very, very exciting for the community. So I'm hoping that by late November, early December, she'll be here before you and give you a presentation. And I will assure you, you'll be smiling ear to ear because she's just an infectious energy like you've never seen. So I'm excited to have her present, and I'm excited about the opportunity. I did share with her that we could probably only do things on probably a 3-year contract because that is valuable land. The council has directed that it is going to be land that'll be basically put back into the development stages, whether it be senior living facilities or something, because it's in a TIF district as well and has also amenities that would support senior living as part of that. So we can't lose sight of that, but if we enjoy what's happening here, we can find her another plot of land, I'm sure she'd be excited. And she would actually like to own her own plot of land, but when I met her at Skyline Farms through Allison's program, I was there for one of the programs that she was hosting. We got a tour of the farm where I hadn't been in a while, and then saw what she was doing there. I said, we have to do this. We really have to figure out how to do this. So she took my challenge and is coming back to you, so I'm really excited about that. Can I throw in 2 more things? Well, he's not saying no, so I'm going to keep going. Allison and I also did talk with Liz Greason about our program, but the follow-up that I have in use of our ARP funds was also about community mental health awareness. And we can leverage some of our ARP funds to actually put on some type of programming for the community as well as our employees. And we're doing a lot of this, and you'll see it across the state now in more and more police departments, basically to try to get to that and get people talking about the stresses that people are under here at work, through families and through organizations, and just life in general right now is a lot harder than it was a couple of years ago. And I think it's going to be around for a little while, and the new normal people are really not adapting so well to. So she was going to put together some ideas and reach out to Allison with those as well. So that's why you saw the placeholders I put in there for discussion in the future by the council. And I was excited that Liz would be still working with our staff. And then finally, Mark Kuntz, a good friend, a good person, just a quality guy that is going to be missed. When he stepped down, we had to actively go twist Ron's arm to run for council, and we won't let him leave yet. So Mark, though, was on the hiring committee that hired me here as the town manager, and he was a really decent guy. He really had a big heart for people, always reached out, would trying to help. He was active in the community. He was a minister at his church for years and kind of held that church together in West Cumberland. But when you walk into the building, and the next time you walk into the building, on the right-hand side, there's a plaque on the building. John Lambert was the council chair, and the first name on the top of the list is Mark Kuntz. So he was on the building committee and on the council part of this building that we're in today. So he had a lot of impact on this community. I'm going to miss him. He's touched a lot of lives in our community, and I think, yeah, you know, he did a lot of good while he was here. So I'm going to miss Mark, and I just wanted to share my experience about it because he was a good guy, really good guy.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, talking about the farming, she does have tremendous energy. I met her through she helped with getting, she supported, I don't know how, just with her energy, probably getting Springbrook Farm turned into a forever farm, and I've met her through the Cumberland and Shabrie Land Trust. But that got me to thinking, I've seen some social media activity around breweries, because there was a discussion of what Stone's going to be, and then does Cumberland and North Yarmouth need 2 breweries? Well, the project being proposed on Longwoods Road, this is a message for the general public, me not engaging in social media but doing the work of the public in public, is that proposal is for a pub with farm-to-table food, not for a brewery. The land use would be very different if it were a brewery than what's being proposed as proposed. So I want the public to know Cumberland's not proposing, no one in Cumberland is proposing a brewery at this time.
Okay. I want to go home and eat supper. I'll entertain a
So
motion.
moved.
Second, anybody got a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you.